FM. He is Bob Pollock from the Extension Service, joining us here this morning. And you can give him a call at 479-1160 or 349-WCCS. That's 349-9227. And ask him your questions about lawns and gardens and plants and such.
All that good stuff.
All that good stuff. If you haven't noticed, stink bug season is here. Boy, is stink bug season here. Man, oh man, they're everywhere. And people are dealing with that. You, in past years, have noted the effect of stink bugs on fruits, particularly apples. Have you heard anything this year? Have they hurt the apple crop in Pennsylvania?
Not too much. It wasn't too bad of a year.
Well, that's good news.
I think they're learning more and more each year about how this creature acts and reacts. And
I thought you were going to say the stink bugs were learning.
Yeah, well,
let's take a caller.
They learn too.
They're pretty smart too.
They adapt.
Good morning.
Hi, Bob.
Good morning.
What's the possibility that partially ripe tomatoes I have still on my vines will mature before the frost freeze gets them?
Well, based on the weather at the moment, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And we're starting to get a little bit more moisture. We've got a little bit of moisture, and it looks like over the coming week or so,
got some warm
we're going to
weather.
have a couple, we're going to have warm weather plus a couple chances for some more moisture to hit, too. So I think you got a pretty good chance. And, I mean, now, if it would get cooler, do you have a way to protect them?
Yes.
Okay. So if you do have a piece of that floating row cover, that would be a way to help extend that. If we do get a cold night, we had one cold night last week that did do some damage to some things. But, yes, that would be a way to ensure that, or at least help that things would continue to ripen on the vine.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Bob.
You're welcome.
Very good. And
And
once a tomato starts to turn,
yes,
you can't pick that, stick it on
That's
the
right.
windowsill, and it'll turn. It'll ripen fully.
And that's right. So if you, of course, the best way and the most optimum way is to let them vine ripen. They'll have the most flavor and the best qualities that way. But if you can't, then
our garden is cleaned out
harvest
right
them
now.
green.
And the only thing left in our garden is supposed to be this one pumpkin vine that has just taken over the entire space. It's just amazing. But a part of it is that it has taken over space that were previously in the tomato range. And I found some tomatoes and some tomato plants hiding underneath it. And they're wonderful, even though our tomato season has been done in our garden for some time. But they'll last.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah. Leads me to this question. A lot of folks will leave certain underground plants in the ground long into the winter. Carrots are one that you think of most of all. What's the procedure if somebody wants to do that? They have a garden that they've not dug up their carrots yet or some other root vegetable. What should they do in order to keep them in the ground?
Well, they could just continue to grow them. So if they did a later seeding, they may have had earlier crops that they harvested, and it might be the same crop that you're trying to double crop, but those root crops, you can plant them later and try to keep them for this purpose and almost overwinter them in the ground. So that's one way so they can mature, and then you can also kind of store them that way versus having to harvest them all and bring them in, and you may or may not have the right conditions, both temperature and humidity, to keep them at their best. But sometimes we can do that out in the garden, and they will survive out there and do fine. So
Cover them with straw?
yes, you can do that. So that as the temperatures change, we'd prefer to keep the ground from freezing.
Okay.
Would be best, because usually once those vegetables freeze,
They turn into mush.
then they'll turn into mush.
Yeah.
So hopefully our soil, and that's the other thing, the soil conditions that you're growing them in need to be you need to have a soil that has a reasonable amount of organic matter in it that you can turn over, that doesn't get hard as a brick. A little bit less clay content and more organic matter in there, because that will help with easing things out and storing them over the winter. And then just try to protect them, and you can put a coating of straw over there as those temperatures, both air and soil, decline, and that will help insulate that. Now, having a layer of straw over there will not prevent the soil from freezing, but it will slow that process down considerably.
Okay.
So, and that's what we're trying. We're trying to avoid any major swings in those temperature changes. And so, by mulching things like that, that will help slow that progression of temperature decrease.
Now, I said carrots. We think of other root plants, beets and things of that nature. Onions. There are probably some that are better at adapting to that sort of
and
tactic than others.
Yeah, some of the cold crops, beets are probably they'll probably freeze out unless you really got them. Okay. Or you could put them in a cold frame, would be another way to do that, to help extend that a little bit longer. But those, the carrots, the parsnips, potatoes, those types of, some of those brassicas, the kohlrabi and things like that will hold up better. And
they'll last.
Yeah, and Brussels sprouts, that's one that we normally need a good frost or two, because that will help build the sugar content in those Brussels sprouts. So we like to have those planted, and the cabbages and the Brussels sprouts too. They're both related, but those will take much colder temperatures to begin with. So oftentimes you could have those growing up until Thanksgiving or maybe later, depending on the year.
So you can actually plan when you're thinking about your garden for next year. You can plan to put some plants in the ground very late in the season with the idea that they're going to last through the colder season, and in the case of some, maybe even thrive when the weather turns cold.
I mean, you can do that with lettuces. Of course, they're not going to take as cold. You do need to definitely have some sort of overwintering structure, or the ability to cover those with that floating row cover, or to make a little bit of a mini hoop house over top of them. We call it a low tunnel versus a high tunnel.
Okay.
A high tunnel is, as we've talked about before, is just an unheated greenhouse that usually is just built over top of the soil. And then we grow the plants in the soil, but we have that protective structure there to help extend the temperatures, both
channel in the
keep
sun's
it warmer.
rays.
Yep, keep it warmer in the spring as well as in the fall.
Along the lines of that conversation, then, and people wanting to get some fresh things from their garden in the colder months, even as we get into December, January, do people take, say, long window boxes that they had used for flowers and can be moved indoors and grow lettuce, for instance, on their windowsill in the wintertime?
Yes.
They
you
do.
definitely can do
and
that.
It's successful.
And sometimes that even works better than trying to do it outside, because the other big factor that we need to keep in mind with fall and winter production is the length of our days, which is usually fairly short, and the amount of sunlight that we get. And so that will affect how those plants will grow and function, not with the shorter days and less light levels. So bringing things in or starting them inside, like some of the lettuces, salad mix, some of the herbs, you can bring those in, plant them in planters or pots, and then use supplemental lighting, fluorescent type lighting, to add more light in there and help them along, because we'll have the temperatures inside. And then, of course, you can put that light on a timer if you want to, and then gauge that for the crop you're trying to grow. What is the best day length we need for this crop, and then put that light on the timer, and then you don't have to worry about turning it on in the morning or turning it off at night. So
you're playing mad scientist there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of what agriculture is. It's the old science in action.
Very, very heavily science driven. Yes.
Very photosynthetic there, Bob.
That's right.
It is. Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank. It's WCCS AM 1160 and FM 101.1. We have less than a minute left. But I wanted to compliment the master gardeners. We were at Blue Spruce at the lodge for an event the other day,
yes.
and I was looking at all the gardens that they've been tending this year. Very nicely done.
Yes, they do a very nice job.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful.
They take care of that very well, and that was one of the reasons when in working with Ed out at the parks and getting that all established back, years ago now. That was one of the things we wanted to do was enhance the appearance, but also we've got beautiful herb gardens there as well, and things are labeled, and so you can go out there and look and, oh, that's what that plant is.
Yeah, we like the biblical section.
Yes, there you go.
Yes. One of them is a biblical. It grows plants that you read about in the Bible. Thank you, Robert.
You are welcome.
It is Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank. It's WCCS on AM 1160 and FM 101.1.